Hello. What's going on? I'm gonna make, I guess, a little rant or discussion about Deep of Night's point system. All right. So most of the stuff in Deep of Night, I think, is pretty good. You have your red enemies, which give you double the runes and also give you specific items. Um, I mean, you up the difficulty, so it gives us more of a challenge and stuff like that. We potentially unlock new harder modes. You give us an extra 3 relic slots to give us more abilities. I'd even go as far as say that at this point, instead of the regular game, you may as well just make depth 1 just like the regular game, because the regular game you only have 3 relics, where, even night you have 6. All great stuff. The point system, however, I don't really like too much. I'm not a big fan of it. Now, I think at depth 1, 2, and 3, it's not too bad. Usually if you win a match, you get about 200 points. I think at depth 1, let me just clarify. Yeah, I won a match here, 6,900 to 7,110. Roughly about 200. Now, you can earn 300 points if there's no map information, or if you're not sure what boss it is, like a mysterious boss. This does not happen a lot, though. I would say that you get these modifiers, I guess, maybe 1 in every 8 matches. I mean, sometimes you get them a little bit more often, but it's not a common thing. It's not every match, but it does give us a little bit of a chance to earn some extra points. An extra 100. When you lose points at depth 1, 2, and 3, I think the depth 1 you don't lose any points, which I think is actually pretty fair, because you're still getting a challenge, you're still not making any progress. I think, yeah, just why not keep it at 0? But then you go to further depths and you lose even more points. Depth 2, I think it's like 100 or 200 per match. I do know this. Depth 3, I think, is like 200, and then it's 400 if you lose a match. Then you get to depth 4 and depth 5. And in depth 4 and depth 5, let me go back to the journal. Let me just bring it up. This will make things make more sense. Anyways, so I have a guy where I like to run trios with randoms, and then I also have a solo guy where I do like other challenges and stuff like that. Basically, here's a depth 5 run. Everdark Augur, I think, was like a mysterious boss. We got 300 for winning. Very tough fight. And then you lose. And down to 6,500. So that's 600 points lost. And then we get to the next day. Now, we did lose at the day 1 boss at depth 5. So yeah, you probably would say, okay, that makes sense. You lose more points if it's earlier in the expedition. So that seems to be the thing, is that if you lose on day 1, you can lose up to 800 points. 800. If you make it to like day 2 boss and the final boss and you lose about 600. But look at how quickly it kicks me back to depth 4. Like, it's 7,100. It's not quite in the middle, but it's getting there. Your high score is, 9,999. But it's so much more punishing, and you lose so much more progress versus the actual progression you can gain yourself. You know, you gain 200 points or 300 for winning a match, no matter what depth, no matter what conditions. Um, Granted that there's now some extra stuff now that have been added. You know, there's 3 new bosses. You got the Drake Lord balancers, everdark balancers, which will add another challenge because probably most of us are not as accustomed to fighting them as, say, the regular bosses we have been fighting for months. So there's probably going to be a bit of losses here and there. You know, I don't think anybody has a perfect streak. But yeah, I think that the scoring system, the ranking system, I think is a bit overkill. I honestly think that if you lose a match, like legitimately, why not just lose 0 points? Just lose nothing. You know, if I lose this match here, why don't I just stay at 4,700? I don't really understand why they have to kick us back. Especially kicking us back for potentially 3 or 4 times the amount of points we get for a win. Like, you can lose so much progress in some of these matches, and like, here's an example here where like fought 3 Everdark bosses that are all fairly challenging. But like again, yeah, you lose. I lost 800 points, and it kicks me back, and I'm almost to the now to the middle of depth 4. You know, because I lost, you know, a few matches. So it just undoes so much progress. Like here's here's some wins, then you lose, and like overall, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 matches I lost, went from 7,100 all the way to 4,300. I think that's overkill. You know, I might be all over the place with some of this, but hear me out. Yeah. So back to if you lose. If you lose, I don't understand why you can't just keep it at 0 points. You know, you're not making progress. The only thing is that, you know, if you want to keep losing points, it just means you're just going to have to keep replaying the same games over and over again. And when you get to depth 3, 4, and 5, like, I mean, unless you play maybe like solo and you're just like the greatest player of all time, you know, but if you want to try other modes like duos or trios with randoms, like I myself, for example, I like to do solos, duos, and trios. I like to play with players, and I like to play with randoms. I think randoms is fun. It's fun to see the strategies we come up with it. You know, the strategies we come up with. You know, Duchess can make Executor an invisible dog, and then also make it immortal if you have a Revenant. You know, interesting possibilities you can get. But I think many people have said this. It's like you really cannot really test the waters with some of these new builds, and you basically got to go off of like using your best character every single time at these depths, which I guess does kind of make sense when it comes to the whole challenge aspect. Yeah. But again, I've been at depth 5 plenty of times, but I just strongly dislike that basically if you lose a match, and if you lose pretty badly, it basically forces you back. It kicks you back to an easier difficulty, or it can do that. To me, it feels like in a Dark Souls game or an Elden Ring, it's like you unlock New Game plus 6, for example. You lose to 2 bosses, and then it kicks you back to New Game plus 5 now, but you have to beat 4 bosses on that difficulty just to unlock New Game plus 6. That's what it feels like to me. So yeah, I think that the point system, at least at 4 and 5, especially, well, when you lose points, not when you gain, I think it's way too overkill. Here are things that I think could be alternate solutions that I think would make it more fair in my opinion. One, you lose the same amount of points as you would lose the points. So if you can lose 800, you should be able to gain 800. You can add in more challenges to have to do that if you want. Everdark boss, great, Forsaken Hollows or whatever. You can keep adding all these different challenges. No map information with a mysterious boss. I'd be down for that. It's challenging and it's also rewarding, I think. But yeah, depth 1 and 2 and even 3, it's more even. Depth 1 you don't lose any points at all. Depth 2, I think you lose 200 and gain 200. So it's at least even. So it's like at least if you lose a few matches, it doesn't kick you back so far to the last difficulty, and then you basically have to win another few matches just to unlock that difficulty again. So if we can lose 800, we should be able to gain it. If we lose 200, we should be able to gain 200 if we win, I think. Another option is, why don't we just lose 0 points? No points. We still have to grind. We still, especially depth 4 to 5, like I think you got to win, well, it's like at least more than 10 matches. I don't know off the top of my head. I know when you're at like depth 4, if you want to get to 999, it's like about 20 matches there. But yeah, why don't you just make us lose 0 points? No points. Just, that's the penalty. I don't really understand why you have to subtract points off of our score, especially 3 or 4 times that amount of one regular match. And it's so much more common to lose points than it is to potentially gain points. It's like, for example, you win 20 matches in a row and gain 200, and then you lose 5 or 6 games in a row, and it's like all that progress is undone. All of it. 20 win streak, all that progress is essentially can be undone by losing 5 or 6 matches in a row. So like you might have a godly win streak, but then you lose a few matches, all the progress is gone. Each match takes about 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So those people that lose those points, they got to put in like an extra 2, 3, 4 hours just to unlock that difficulty that they were just using. Yeah. So yes, just keep the score at 0, man. Just keep it at 0. Or here's a little twist too. How about you give us the option to lose 0 points but gain no relics at all? You gain absolutely nothing. Or you can lose 600 points and 800, but you still get relics. Because I kind of hear that some people don't mind losing because they at least get relics that will help them in the next games. I think that's kind of fair. But I think for some other players, though, I think they genuinely want to go up in difficulty and they want to experience the harder difficulty. They want that challenge. And just to be seemingly forcibly kicked back again for just losing a few matches, I think it's just really overkill. So yeah, win-loss. You lose 0 points but gain nothing. Or you can keep the point system going. If you want to lose 800 points because you like that, or if you want to lose 600, keep that too. It's like 0 points or this. Choose your poison. What do you want? I think that make it kind of interesting. What else was I gonna say? Yeah, give me a second here. Ah, yeah. So, I had to think about it for a little bit there, sorry. But anyways, um, I remember when Deep at Night first came out, and I think a lot of players probably remember this too, but um, once you went from Depth 1 to Depth 2, you were not able to unlock Depth 1, and basically you were stuck at Depth 2, and you could not go below it. It was like this, I think, for like a good month or two. Because the thing that kind of happened was that there's some players that want to go higher and face higher difficulty, but then there's some players that don't like the higher depths and wanted to stay at like depth 1, 2, and 3, and not being potentially like one-shotted. They just wanted a little bit of difficulty, which I think is absolutely fine. But anyways, you couldn't go back to depth 1. So players basically started quitting. They would lose their matches on purpose. Sometimes, I think, in trios with randoms, which would affect the performance of other players, and those other players would also lose points. I mean, it probably makes more sense for them to play solo, of course, and lose there to decrease their ranking. But, because you have a system like this, somebody quits, it affects the rest of, it affects everybody else, which, I'll get more into it in a little bit. But anyways, the thing is, they eventually, after about a month or two, they changed it so that you could actually de-rank yourself and go back by one depth. So you could go from depth 5 to depth 4, depth 4 to depth 3, depth 3 to depth 2, and then finally depth 2 to depth 1. So now we didn't have the option to go back to depth 1, but now we do. You can almost say, hey, congratulations on clearing depth 2. We're going to give you this option to go back to depth 1 if you don't like this depth. So with that said, why can you not have the option for ranking yourself up, basically? Choosing any depth you want. Like, why can't you just, if you're at depth 3 or 4, or you're at depth 2, and you want to challenge all of a sudden, why can't you just switch it to depth 5? I mean, yes, I think many of us are like, okay, well, first, you got to play a bunch of matches, you have to unlock it. Okay. How about this, then? Let's say, when you reach depth 5, you have to win 20 matches total. You win 20 matches, or maybe like 30 or something, and then you should be able to unlock that depth. And it should never force kick you back to 5, to 4, or 3. I think if you've proven you've won a bunch of matches, I think that's a good sign that your skills belong in that depth. I mean, here's another twist. How about you have to defeat all of the bosses at least once or twice, and all the Everdark bosses at least once or twice. Do that at depth 5, unlock it, you get depth 5 forever. Maybe if you were to choose a difficulty, it's not going to shoot you up to like 99999, which is like the high score, but it should at least shoot you up to like 6,000, which I think is like the bare minimum. We can still climb if we want to go to 9999. If people still want to use the point system, they can still do it. But, like, I don't know. Just like, I just feel like you already give us depth protection as well too, which is something I didn't say before. At depth 3 and at depth 4 and depth 5, you can lose 2 matches and not be kicked down a depth, which I think is a step in the right direction. I definitely think most players probably like that more than before. So, like, again, You gave us the option to go backwards in depth so that we could go to an easier difficulty for basically clearing higher depths. Um, so again, if we can clear the higher depths and we again fall under certain conditions like beat 20 matches or beat every single boss at depth 5, why not just reward us with that ability to just be able to choose whatever level we want at that point? Again, I think that proves that most of us have the skills necessary to be at those depths. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, there was another guy that made a video. I don't know him off the top of my head, but he was the one that actually said, winning 20 matches and then you can unlock it. It's like, if they don't want to just like hand you it just for free, yeah, give us a challenge, entice us to want to go higher, entice us to want to go lower, or if we don't. Like you've already done lots of great things with Deep in Night. I love it. I like that you buffed Revenant, Raider. Not a fan of the 50 pot limit with Scholar, but I can still roll with it. I use other consumables. I love doing consumable runs, but can get carried away there a bit. So yeah, the point system. I hope that it changes. I think it was an experiment for the last few months to kind of see where things were, but then, I mean, FromSoft, I think it's been doing a very great job with actually kind of listening to the feedback that players aren't particularly fans of. Revenant was not the greatest for a while, but they eventually did do something. Now her summons are really good. So it's like, I think they've done a great job with addressing like the problems and the problems that a lot of people have. So yeah, Deep of Night going forward. Let us have access to all the depths. If we want to go down because we don't want to face a harder difficulty, I think that's fine. If we don't want to be kicked back to depth 3 or 4 because we lose, 5 or 10 matches because you keep getting, I don't know, everdark balancers and Dreglord, everdark Libra without less likely to be targeted, and like you just have like a bad match. Yeah, just going forward, give us that ability to choose to decrease our rank or to increase our rank. This has been out for months now. You tested the waters the first few months. I mean, since it came out, I've never been a fan of the ranking system. And I've done solo and I've done trios. So I do solo and I do trios with randoms. Again, I said it before. I like trios with randoms because I like the unique ideas that me and the teammates come up with. I mean, it's even fun even if we lose. It still is kind of fun and creative. I think that's most of what I want to say. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else? Kind of talking quite a bit here. I think that's all for now. I mean, there's... Yeah, I can't think of anything. I'm trying to think. I guess these are some small gripes I guess I have. Again, I had to think about it for a little bit. I guess the fact they say that it stretches to infinite, but it really doesn't. Anybody can gain. Anybody has that ability to get up to the highest score, which is 9,999. Once you get that score, it doesn't go any higher. I guess I don't really know why they would call it a rank system when basically anybody can actually reach that score and everybody would have the same score. Because who exactly are you ranking against? If somebody has 6,000, someone has 7,000, okay, that person with 7,000 has the higher score. But everybody has that possibility to get to 999, and you can't go past that. So, um, I don't, so I think the numbers in some ways are a little bit of a waste of time. I mean, it can be satisfying, but it's like you're not ranking against anybody else though. So I guess I'm not really entirely sure why they call it. I mean, it does determine you go up in difficulty, but like I don't know. When I think of a rank system, it's like a leaderboard or something like that. And it's not really that. Again, it's probably not the biggest gripe. I don't know. I just notice it. I just think it's a bit odd. And then the other, now this one's off topic, regarding the everdark bosses. So we've had everdark bosses for I guess about 4 months now. And the way it works is that they rotate 2 everdark bosses every week. I mean, now it's 3 bosses ever since we got the DLC. At this point, why do you have to keep rotating the bosses in, and why do you only have to rotate 3 bosses? I kind of don't get why you can't just give us the option to face all the everdark bosses at this point. I think when they initially first released it, I think they wanted to keep gamers interested to like tune in each week to fight a different everdark boss. Which, I think was kind of good in the beginning. But it's been months now, and I think they've cycled through the bosses quite a bit. I think it's pretty entertaining, I think, in the beginning when you're not sure, you're facing this new one for the first chance. You only have a week to do it, I guess. Like, that entices a lot of people. But, yes, we've pretty much shuffled through every everdark boss probably more than once, twice, 3 times at this point. I don't really understand why you can't just add them in the regular roster at this point. Especially when you play Deep of Night, you can fight all the everdark bosses there. Actually, like you can actually fight some of the everdark bosses in Deep of Night and unlock them versus doing it in the base game. Like you don't have to do it in the base game to face them at Deep of Night, but you usually got to be like depth 3 or 4 to kind of get those new everdark bosses that might not be on your roster of 3 bosses. I think there's a total of 8, I think. Yeah, I think it's 8 everdark bosses right now. And they, you rotate about 3 right now. Yeah, I don't get why you don't just release them all at once. It's not the biggest thing. I mean, I guess the other thing with Deep of Night too, also, kind of along with my my point system rant. Why don't you also give us the option to choose if we want to have no map information or a random encounter? Like, again, let's say we have to win a certain amount of matches. Why can't we just use that feature whenever we want? If, again, we played a bunch of matches, we've gone through this already, we got the experience. Because you don't get that kind of stuff every single match. And again, you can lose so much more points at a quicker rate than you can gain them. So I think that'd be awesome if you could actually choose that. I'd like to try a match where there's no map information with a mysterious boss. I think it'd be fun. Give us, if you're gonna go the way of the point system, give us more points. 400, 500, 600. If they're content with the point system. I also think on that account, why can't we just kind of choose the bosses, I think, eventually in Deep of Night? I get it. The fact that you can't pick them, you kind of have to adjust to certain things. Although there's already kind of ways to work around that. You can already kind of make preset relics so that you're not completely caught off guard. So you're ready to face certain bosses. I think that's how the regular game works. I think that you can choose any boss you want, but I think you can also set it to random mode too. I might be wrong on this. So yeah. Give us some more options. Yeah. So, hopefully we'll see changes in Deep of Night. I don't know. I kind of doubt anything will change. But, what are your guys' thoughts? Do you guys like the point system? The ranking system? Do you enjoy it? Do you not dislike it? Oh. This is what I didn't talk about. There's a lot. And I didn't really organize this. The punishment for when players leave a match. Now, this has been a big thing that's been talked about. I think even before Deep of Night. And also, players with cheated relics. So, I don't know. They kind of go hand in hand a little bit. But anyways. We'll talk about the cheated relics first. So, since Deep of Night is released, there's some players, especially that's seem to happen more at the higher depths, like 3, 4, and 5, that are able to kind of, I guess, modify or hack their relics to make them whatever they want. One such example is that I played with a recluse one time that had 6 relics, and in each relic she had 3 magic plus 4s. Normally, usually if you get a relic, you don't usually get even 2 magic plus 4s. You get like magic plus 4 like once. But no, she had like like 18 magic plus 4s basically. And she was doing so much damage, and she was just annihilating these bosses. I remember there was a raider one time that did the same thing as the recluse, except instead of magic plus 4, it was physical plus 4. So he had 6 slots. Each slot had 3 physical plus 4, and he was like two-shotting everything with his main melee weapon. I will say this about the cheaters out there. I think it is a bit disappointing that players have to do this, or they feel they have to do this. Although, I've seen players with, hacked relics, apparently, that still will get killed easily, because even though they're really, really powerful, you also get one shot by most of the stuff at Depth 5 and Depth 4 anyways. So, even with all those hacked relics, you still got to have a good degree of skill as far as like dodging and placement and stuff like that. You can't. I don't think most players are going to win just on pure brute power alone. If you have to fight multiple foes, you might be able to kill the strongest enemies, but then a bunch of smaller ones swarm up against you and you're done. So, hope that the people that are cheating will stop that. Hopefully, there'll be less of that. I'm not really sure how you can control something like that. So I don't know. Players reporting that player or something like that. I'm not really sure. And then, all right. The penalty for when a player disconnects for various reasons. If it's a trio or a duo. All right. So, one thing that I think is actually okay about this is that if you're in a trio, for example, and the player disconnects at any time for whatever reason, they will get the max penalty, which I believe is 800 points. I think they lose about 800 if they disconnect from that match. And I think the rest of the players, um, they'll lose like 400 or 600 depending on the depth, which I think that's overkill in itself too. I think that I think that if there's two remaining players and a player disconnects like in the middle of the match or something like that, and the two other players, have to adjust to the fact they don't have a third teammate now. They lose the match. I think they should lose 0 points. Kind of like I said before with just regular Deep in Night. Like, it's not their fault. The player's fault for disconnecting, for leaving for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but still, I don't think it's fair for the other two players to get punished for something they couldn't really control, in my opinion. Um, as far as like the penalty goes for a person that actually quits or again disconnects, if there is going to be a point system, maybe that's the one time I could apply it. They get sent back a whole depth or something like that. Or I don't know, maybe that's a bit too severe. Maybe they cannot play 3-player for like a certain time limit. It's like, hey, you sabotage, you affected the progress of a team. You cannot connect to another 3-player match for like 60 minutes or something like that. I don't know. I feel that could be a decent punishment. If we're not going to do the point system. If they do it more and more, it's like, okay, now it's going to be 2 hours now. You can't play for 2 hours now. Like a temporary ban maybe. Although, when it comes to somebody disconnecting, I think it's kind of hard to prove why they disconnected. Sometimes, that is. Most of the thing, I think that most of us that have played Deep in Night, that have had players that have quit out, usually seems to be because they're playing very badly. They're probably dying a lot. They're not making much progress. They choose routes that are like you decide to go to the castle in the middle, and they decide to go in the upper right corner, and they just are not working with you at all, and then they get killed up in that corner, and they're pissed off because like you didn't go with them because like you were overruled. So like players seem to quit when it comes to those scenarios, and I think that's really just a bunch of players that are just frustrated. They're dying a lot. They had 60,000 runes, but then they lost all that, and now they're level 1 on day 2 at the day 1 boss or something like that. They get frustrated and they quit. Yeah, if we are going to have a punishment or keep a punishment, I would punish those kinds of players that potentially can ruin everybody else's experience. I mean, in a solo game, you're at least not affecting anybody else but yourself. Again, I don't favor it. I think that a person should try to get through the match, even if they think they're going to lose. And that's part of the extra challenge. But I do get why people would get frustrated, and, they would. Not that I'm saying they should. But, anyways, though, other players will get disconnected due to, like, connection issues sometimes, too. This is where I think it might be a bit unfair with the punishment, because this time, if I played the other day with a player that kept trying to play the entire match, but he kept getting kicked off and disconnected, like, every 2 minutes, but he kept trying to reconnect every time. He must have, like, reconnected and got kicked out, like, 6 or 8 times during the entire 40-minute run. So, like, it's not like that player was trying to sabotage us. He kept trying to come in. He kept trying to play the game. But his connection issues just were not working. I think he may have been in a different country that's just way further from where I live, so the connection just wasn't working out for him. So, like, when we lost the match, we were fighting the last boss, the day 3 boss, and he disconnects. Like, we're in the middle of the match, and then it's just us 2 remaining, and we get killed. I don't actually, I'd assume he probably gets penalized for like 800 points. But that's a situation where it's not exactly his fault. So, you know, I think sometimes, punishments can be fair, but they can also be kind of unfair. It's kind of hard to know the reason for why they left. I mean, some are more obvious, but then others you don't quite know. So yeah. Another, the select screen too. I hear about this one a lot. I didn't actually know this for the longest time. Every time I ran a trio, like it seemed like you could never get out of the match, no matter what. However, in the character select screen, when you're first choosing your character, they give you about 30 seconds to do it. You can actually close the game down, and your score stays the same. It stays at 0 points. Now in solo play, you can kind of do the same thing, but you can kind of quit the match at any time. At any time during the actual match in solo play, but not in multiplayer. Like, even to the point where on day 2 or day 3 or day 1, if you lose at the boss, you can just close the game and you get 0 points. Well, yeah, back to trios. So you can do this. You can also quit out of the game and get no points. If you quit in the selection screen, which you'd have to, like, manually turn the game off, the way it's not intended. There's a lot of players that don't like this. I will say, I however, think, though, that if we were to make a rule where a player doesn't want to play this match or this game, they shouldn't be forced to have to be in this match. If they get everdark balancers and they know they're just not that good and they don't want to lose their score, I get it. Some people might just say, suck it up and just do it anyways. Losses happen. But I think at the selection screen, the character selection screen, you get 30 seconds to really decide. It's like, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to? If you don't feel comfortable facing this boss, that could affect the other 2 players' standings as well, because, it's triple the difficulty with 3 players. So if, I'd rather have if one of my teammates was not confident within himself and doesn't think he's going to do that well in this match against this boss or something, I don't want to play with him. I don't want to play with a player that is probably not going to be confident, probably does, feels he doesn't have the skills, probably doesn't want to even try, perhaps. I don't want to have that kind of teammate. So I'd rather him quit out in the character selection screen before we get into the match. I think that in the character selection screen, again, it doesn't affect anybody. All it does is it just kicks the other 2 players back to, like, the waiting room. Nobody loses points. Nobody gets stuck in a 2-player match. I get it's annoying for a lot of people because they want to play the game and they don't want to deal with that. But again, if there is a person that I'm playing with, like, I think everybody wants to play in teams with competent players, not players that think they are not going to do good, that probably are going to lose this match. They're not good against this boss, haven't had practice. They're like, oh man, I'm going to end up losing this for the rest of the team, maybe, or something like that. I think it's fair to do it at the selection screen. because again, the game has not started. All you're doing is you're selecting your character. So that might be a controversial take to some of that. If you want to get out of the game, let it be at the selection screen. Don't let it be once the game starts and you're flying in. Don't let it be after day 1 or day 2. Don't let it be on day 3. Let it be before you even start the game. Character selection screen. All right. I said a lot. I think that is all for now. If you guys want to put down your thoughts on a lot of this, do you like the Deep of Night ranking point system? What do you think should be done about people with cheated relics? What are your opinions about people that with cheated relics? People in the character selection screen and trios closing out. Yeah. just let's talk about it. Will it change? Probably not. But hey, at least we can have fun and just chat about it. All right. I'll see you guys again soon. Take care.